All right, 12:01. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Littlejohn. I'm a senior policy advisor at Adams and Reese, and I represent ACEC Florida and FES on all things environment and water policy. And I'm very pleased to be your host in the third of our series of webinars, 6 webinars we're planning to do on the new state.
You muted yourself, Jeff.
You did.
Somebody auto muted. Okay, all right. So somebody probably very smartly hit mute of everybody. But yeah, please mute yourselves as you join, and I'll do one more reminder when I get going over to you, Jen. So this is the third in a series of 6 webinars that the Water Resources Committee of ACEC Florida and the Environmental Committee of FES are hosting throughout the year on the Stormwater Rule. We're still soliciting topics and speakers for some of the last sessions of the year. So if you have any ideas, please do email them to me or Laura Heisselman. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We got about 118 people, and probably a few more people will be logging on. As you join, please do mute. We'll have questions and answers towards the end. So the goal of this webinar series is to help our members and help the stakeholders affected by this rule become better educated, so we can educate our clients and stakeholders. We've also asked guest speakers to join us each time so we can get perspectives from other agencies. And like I said, this is the third in our series. And the first one we had Borja Crane from FDEP, and we talked about kind of some of the background of the rule, along with some of the issues that he's seen from his perspective. Last month we had Dave Miracle from St. Johns River Water Management District. And this session, we're very pleased to have Jennifer Johnson, state. Thank you. If somebody can help me mute that person. All right, awesome. State stormwater engineer from FDOT, and I'll introduce her just in a minute. The session is intended to bring her viewpoint into focus with an emphasis on kind of the effects on transportation projects and planning, and I'm very eager to hear her comments. Before we get started, I want to welcome any guests today from the Transportation Committee of ACEC Florida. We did reach out to them and ask them to join us, so welcome to the Water Resources Committee. And I think we probably also have some folks from Land Development. Thank you for joining us. So with us here today is Jennifer Johnson, PE, CPM. She's the State Drainage Engineer at Florida DOT in the Roadway Design Office. And among her other responsibilities, she oversees the development of the DOT's Drainage Manual and Drainage Design Guide. She's got 22 years of experience, including 15 at FDOT. So she brings deep experience in drainage design, stormwater management, and hydrologic and hydraulic policy. Jennifer earned her BS in civil engineering and MS, emphasis on water resources, from the University of South Florida. So go Bulls. Welcome, Jen. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here today. As we talked about before, I'd love to just have you kind of dive in with what you're hearing, what you're thinking, kind of whatever's top of mind for you. And again, I'm going to ask everybody to hold your questions to the end, and we'll do a moderated Q&A when Jennifer's done with her comments. So thank you, Jen.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me. We've been preparing for the new stormwater rules since the beginning. So we've, attended every TAC meeting. We're in regular coordination with FDEP. And so there's a lot of aspects of the rule that impact the department. So I'll just kind of jump into kind of how we're preparing for these new challenges. So kind of the first challenge that hit us off the gate was the operation and maintenance requirements of the new stormwater rule, because those were effective first. So did you know DOT has over 5,800 stormwater ponds and over 8,000 linear treatment systems? That's just what's documented in our stormwater asset management system, which, we're still developing different aspects of. And then could you imagine if each one of those had a unique operation and maintenance plan? I'm pretty sure I wouldn't work for the department much longer. We went and coordinated with FDEP, and to utilize our existing maintenance policies and procedures, which includes our statewide stormwater management plan, our maintenance guide for stormwater assets, our maintenance rating program, and our stormwater asset management system, which is a GIS database of all of our stormwater assets. And so we developed a comprehensive operation and maintenance plan form. So for all of my FDOT consultants out there, if you are working on a project that will be maintained by FDOT, we have a comprehensive operation and maintenance plan form. It's available on our drainage website. I'll show it to y'all a little bit later. But you know, it was a way for us to kind of create that consistency for maintenance. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is create consistency within the department and how we operate. So it makes it a lot easier for our asset maintenance folks. You know, you maintain pond A the same way you maintain pond B. Or with the same documents, I guess I should say, because each pond is different and unique. But we have standard plans that we've spent a lot of time and effort developing. And so we've just formally adopted them into this comprehensive maintenance program. But any ponds that would be maintained by others, those would have to be documented separately. And you know, an example of that would be having an executed maintenance agreement with that entity for those projects. So after operation and maintenance, the next thing that came up was that certification of financial capability for the perpetual operation and maintenance entities. That form required a cost estimate for your total annual operating expenses, you know, throughout the remaining useful life of the system. So that's kind of we don't really budget per pond. You know, it's just, you know, I mean, again, you know, 5,800 stormwater ponds, you know, we don't have individual budgets for each of them. And so we coordinated again with FDEP and discussed kind of our statutory requirements of the department to ensure that we meet we actually have a statutory requirement to meet 100% of the acceptable maintenance standards on the state highway system. And, you know, so we first budget for operation and maintenance costs, which currently are about $1 billion a year. And then the need to protect our competitive solicitation of commodities and contractual services. And so through these discussions, we developed a calculator for each project to use on that certification form. And I can show it all to you a little bit later. We have gone in and updated our drainage manual already. So we updated that for January 2025. Chapter 5 has a new stormwater BMP table that are kind of transportation appropriate. And we've added a column for maintenance impacts. So again, keeping things as normal or straightforward as possible for maintenance and, you know, not causing maintenance costs to escalate. You know, we've kind of ranked different BMPs, low, medium, and high as far as the maintenance effort. And we've added some requirements to have coordination with the district maintenance office if we are going to use any of those high, you know, maintenance intensive activities, because, you know, we get in our design bubble and, you know, but we need to think about maintenance now as well. And so we've added that to the drainage manual. And then we've also added links in our chapter 1 for all of our operation and maintenance forms for the ERP permit. And then probably the most maybe not talked about change in the stormwater rule, but one that I was really passionate to see updated was section 11 of applicant handbook volume 1, which dealt with temporary drainage. Through a lot of coordination and research and diving into the history, which is something I really love to understand, is kind of where did all of the stuff and things that were required to do, where did they come from? Section 11 was updated to kind of remove all of the CGP requirements. So there was an effort, it's my understanding, back in the day, there was an effort to kind of combine the CGP and the ERP permit. But that effort, EPA said it needs to be 2 separate permits. And so, but the language was left behind in the ERP permit, which caused a lot of conflict between the CGP program and the ERP program. And so if you'll notice now the section 11 is only a few pages long. And it's because they got rid of all of the CGP items that were required. This is really nice for us because these changes support the contractor's flexibility to control their means and methods and their own permit obligations underneath the CGP program, which does control over the ERP whenever there's a similar item. And that's in Applicant Handbook, Volume 1, Section 1.3.2, for those of you who like to dive into the Applicant Handbook. And so all FDOT ERP applications are to use our erosion and sediment control plan narrative to demonstrate how our FDOT specifications meet the requirements of the ERP Section 11.2 requirements. And then if that form that we provide also provides a crosswalk for the contractor to understand how the ERP requirements and where they apply into the CGP permit. We've updated our website to include frequently asked questions, and as questions are asked, we will continue to update it, very similar to DEP's FAQs. We've also initiated research on updating our transportation EMCs. The majority of our transportation EMCs were actually taken when we had leaded fuel, just for those of you who remember leaded fuel. And so we're looking at, a pavement only EMC and then the, roadside EMC. Currently, all of the transportation EMCs do include the pavement and the roadside. And so, asphalt and concrete do not produce nitrogen or phosphorus. And so I think there's been a skew in our EMC loadings for what a transportation project actually produces. So for example, 10 lanes of I-4 versus, a rural 2-lane road like up here in the Panhandle. But right away to right away, there's a lot more green space in the Panhandle versus the green space in I-4. They should not have the same nutrient loadings. And that's the way the rule is kind of laid out. So we've kicked off that research project. I'm really excited to see how that goes. And then we also have some continued research. We're going into our phase 2 on in situ soils. And so for those of you who haven't seen my research presentation, we did a project looking at vegetative filter strips and the nutrient removal efficiency of engineered medias in the roadside shoulder versus just a standard roadside shoulder, graded at a 1-to-6 slope, meeting our safety standards. And we actually found the in situ soils sequestered more nutrients than the engineered media, which got us questioning, well, gosh, why are we using engineered media? We can use the material that's already on the job site. It's a significant cost savings, and we're getting more nutrient sequestration from that. And so what are the soil properties that indicate an in situ soil would have those, superior nutrient removals than the engineered media? So that way we can apply media in the best place possible. So, let's not apply it where the native soils will do what they need to do. And then it's an option for when we have poorer soils that don't have that nutrient sequestration. And let's see, up next on my list, we're in a learning phase right now. Okay, so the regulatory community and the design community, we're all figuring some things out. We are asking everyone to really pay attention to your permit conditions. We've seen some, I guess the best example is the updates in June 2024 updated the general conditions. So the general permit conditions, they updated the erosion and sediment control manual for the performance-based erosion and sediment control requirements. So they reference the 2013 manual, and we just received a permit that still referenced the 2007 manual. Make sure that, the conditions don't conflict with the comprehensive operation and maintenance plan, or there should be a conversation about, when those permit conditions exist. And we only have 21 days after the permit is issued to kind of resolve those conflicts. So We're really asking everyone to, you know, pay attention to those things. And then if you see anything or hear anything that is interesting or contrary to what you were expecting, you know, please reach out to central office, reach out to myself or one of my staff kind of at the front end. We're here to help, and we do realize we're navigating new waters. And so, you know, we get a lot of questions, and, you know, we're trying to, you know, create a consistent approach to permitting. So, and part of that is consultant education. Um, and so your help is greatly appreciated. And so I guess how we're going to meet the rule, we're going to start kind of taking credit where we've never, or we're rarely ever to take credit before. So the moment the water leaves the pavement is really where we're going to start taking account for our nutrient removals. Our roadside shoulders actually do infiltrate a lot of water. We have research from UCF, the Stormwater Academy. Part of what we were, you know, it was actually a research project on the bioabsorption media, but we also just had our standard roadside shoulder. And we were able to infiltrate a significant amount of rain on our standard 1 to 6 slope, as long as, you know, you have the appropriate length of slope. And so, you know, that's typically designers, I think you were like, okay, we need like, you know, X over the basin and let's size a pond. And so this rule, just erase that from your memory. That is not how this is going to work anymore. And so we, you know, trying to get the engineering community to change the way they approach stormwater is going to be a significant change in direction. You know, probably I need to use that ship metaphor, you know, like we're turning a battleship, but we're going to need to turn sooner than later. And so because we are probably the largest, I would probably say we're the largest developer in the state, right? We're over the majority of the state. We apply for a whole lot of permits. Creating consistency will help not only our staff, but it will also help the district staff, right? It'll help the regulatory community. Like when you see a DOT project, you know you're going to get an O&M form, you're going to get the O&M cost estimate, you're going to get our temporary erosion and sediment control form. You know, this is how DOT is going to operate. And so I really hope that that helps both sides of the table. We do have some grandfathering provisions. I'm sure that that is, you know, a hot topic. We have the districts. So, and that was really an effort to just protect our work program. So DOT has a 5-year work program. We're trying to, you know, kind of, you know, we want to protect that, that program as much as we can. And so that language was drafted back in 2022. And so the dates are a little bit awkward with how it actually ended up getting implemented based on the day that the rule was signed. So the districts are actively working to complete any ongoing PD&E projects by that June 28th, 2026 deadline. We are, you know, so that's really kind of the goal. And then for, you know, we are also any project that was ongoing as the June 28th, 2024 date. So like if we had a notice, if you had a notice to proceed for design services by June 28th, 2024, that project is also grandfathered in. Again, you know, before the rule was signed, we didn't know the rule was going to be the rule. And so, you know, just, you know, again, to protect that effort. And there's other various dates that I could show you the frequently asked questions document. Do you want me to do that now? Would that be a good time?
I think that would be great. And while you're sharing your screen, I just want to give you kudos for all the nautical references. It appeals to my Navy background. But your turning the battleship thing and your kind of call to action for all of us to get really to change the way we think about the rule. I totally agree with you. All the times I've spoken about the new rule, I've used a not as good an analogy. I said we've all been checkers players for 40 plus years, and we need to learn to play chess, and we need to learn pretty quick because it's a
Right.
different definitely a different rule.
It's different, and I still struggle sometimes. So I do have some amazing staff here in central office that I like to say they speak nutrients. So where I do not necessarily do that so well. And so we are developing, actually we are doing some more tools. So for those of you who have never been to our website, this is our website. We have the current drainage manual, the drainage design guide. So one thing I didn't mention yet is that we are working on updates to the drainage design guide, chapter 9, which is stormwater management facilities. We've added a bunch of examples for how to look at like vegetative filter strips and things as it relates to transportation. And it is currently under review. Once that document is done, it is my hope to run around the state, essentially go to each district office, host a training, get as many consultants in the room as we can, and kind of walk you through what we've prepared. So hopefully before the new year. But I mean, scheduling and weather permitting and all those things, we'll see what happens. So this is the drainage manual. I kind of clicked the links to make sure everything was okay. But so we have this form access here. You can click drainage manual forms. It brings you here to this website. So this FDM form 251A, that is that plan narrative for ERP applications for the temporary erosion and sediment control. And please note, permanent erosion and sediment control is still requires a PE and is signed and sealed in the contract plans. It's just this temporary erosion and sediment control, that does not require engineering expertise is what is covered by the FDM form 251A. We have our O&M plan and our O&M cost estimate available. Also, if you have any suggestions for changes to the drainage manual, the links are there as well. So this is the temporary erosion and sediment control plan narrative. We calculate that disturbed area, and we've added this note, if we're disturbing more than an acre, which most DOT projects do, the contractor is required to obtain NPDES CGP permit. That's the construction generic permit. And that permit requires them to develop the temporary erosion and sediment control plan under their control and supervision. And so by us not providing a plan during the ERP permit, it allows their plan to have control, because it's always a conflict when there's two plans on a project, right? And so our specification is our contract with the contractor, and it requires the contractor actually to develop that plan and provide it to us at their pre-construction conference. And so we have a nice little table here that kind of walks through what those requirements are in 11.2 and what standard specifications apply. Our standard specification document is about 1,000 pages, give or take the year. So obviously we didn't want to attach that to every ERP permit because that would be a lot of data. So we've just made this table for everyone. So up next is I was hoping it would be faster. Sometimes during lunch our systems go down, but apologize for that delay. Here's this is our operation and maintenance plan. This is the document that we worked with John Coates and Borja and his crew and the legal department and our legal staff as well, that we put together to develop this comprehensive program. We also worked with our MS4 permit coordinators and our administrator here in central office to really develop this program. And so essentially we're an MS4 entity throughout most of the state. And we've already through that program developed inspection and maintenance documents. And so we're going to use those documents across the entire state. So even for a pond that was built before this rule, we are still going to maintain them in accordance with this plan. And so this just creates this consistent approach for us. And then, and we're going to report also in accordance with that program, with our MS4 program. And so that is that document. And then we have the cost estimate form. And so there are a whole lot of references in here to the Florida statutes and where kind of all this direction comes from. And so this is our cost estimator tool that we use to kind of provide an estimate of the annual cost to maintain the program. And so with that, I guess the one question that I think you had was about how the community can kind of help be prepared. And so I think the read the rule, practice the rule, ask questions, and think beyond design. So and in like even just what you put on the project, think about kind of how it gets permitted. Like if you, for a proprietary product, for example, if you put a proprietary media mix into a permit and that producer goes out of business, what do we do? But if you put, we're going to provide an engineered media that removes X nitrogen and X phosphorus, then, you know, the permit is open to use any media that meets those requirements. And so, you know, just trying to, we don't want to get stuck trying to, you know, force something that, you know, isn't available or is not working, and then also kind of saves the permit modification, you know, because we wouldn't want to have to go and modify a permit every time media wasn't available. And then I guess my other big thing is when you are representing the department as a consultant, you need to be prepared. You need to go in to a meeting with the regulatory agency knowing how your project is going to meet the rule. Go into the meeting with your statements. Do not questions. If you have questions, contact the district. If they can't help you, call me. And if you get asked questions that you don't know the answer to, like say, I'll get back to you, and then come and talk to us. Because again, we're trying to create this consistent approach statewide. We are trying to, it is a new rule. There's a lot of different parts and pieces that everyone's trying to figure out. So again, when you are representing the department, be prepared. You know, and remember that you are also there to be, you know, a good steward of the taxpayer dollars. You know, that, you know, while yes, DOT's goal, we are very schedule driven. You know, we want to get that permit. We need to get that permit. We also need to just do things appropriately, and really balance that, our, what we need to do. And, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. And this one I don't maybe have the best explanation for, but you know, if you've met pre-post and you're struggling, you got that 55-80, or actually let's go the 95-95, you know, you're in a very restrictive basin and you can get 90% there and you're stuck, call us. You know, that, you know, like there may just need to be a conversation, you know, like sometimes, you know, that last, you know, squeezing the last drop is the hardest part. And so let's talk about what we can do. And then all of these tools and ideas we come up with, you know, we'll be sharing on the website, you know, just, you know, to help future designers come after us. And a lot of, and I guess I'll do my land development example. So your last webinar, I was excited to hear about the design problem that was presented on DEP's website. So I went and checked it out. And yeah, so I was super excited. I was like, yes, let's see what DEP's got. And
it's not super exciting. I hope we didn't oversell that.
You may have a little bit, but yeah. but it actually brings up an excellent point. that linear transportation is not like regular land development. And so the first thing I noticed was that the existing site was only a foot from the groundwater table. And, so one of the ways that they were meeting the rule was they just raised the site 4 feet and added an exfiltration trench, which I guess if you have a small site, that may be easy to do. But like if a linear project, raising the road 4 feet, I mean, think of every driveway connection, trying to maintain driveway connections, driver visibility issues, depending on, the grades of the, adjacent properties. And how much right of way we actually have to, accommodate that driveway. So going through a floodplain, our roads traverse, the highs and the lows. So floodplain compensation, and how are we going to do that? So like wholesale raising a road 4 feet to provide an exfiltration trench is just not going to be cost effective or really feasible once the design gets going. And so, we do have to think of the linear environment a little bit differently, which is where the tools like the vegetative filter strip are going to come in handy. Looking at what we're finding is we're going to need to start thinking about drainage earlier in the design process. So like when we're establishing a typical section, if we have, what we're finding is if we have a flush shoulder and use our existing DOT standard construction methods and fill materials to construct our front slope of the, our unpaved shoulder and front slope of the ditch, that we can achieve quite a bit of our nutrient removal. And so, and hopefully more so when we update that EMC value. But, a flush shoulder typical section versus a curb and gutter typical section, that's going to make a huge impact on our ability to meet this rule. And so, and making sure we have enough right of way to allow water to infiltrate in that green space is going to be key. And so we're going to work with our roadway and planning folks to kind of make sure that drainage gets considered a little bit earlier in the process.
And Jennifer, this is amazing. I took a ton of notes. I've learned a lot. Thank you for all of that. A couple of just quick comments that I wrote down while you were talking. First, I just want to, tip a hat to the kind of your whole programmatic approach to this. I love that you're attacking the kind of the problem set of the nutrient generation, because that's going to significantly impact your obligations going forward. So really taking another hard look at the EMCs to help reduce the loading that you're obligated to deal with. And then also really look at those roadside swales and vegetative filter strips for their nutrient removal to get credit for everything that you get credit for. I think that's really going to make a difference. And I'm eager to see the results of that. Selfishly, I'm going to be looking to see if your work could be applied to other projects as well. I mean, a vegetated swale is a vegetated swale. I mean, I hope. I haven't seen any results yet. And if the EMCs for roadways or for pavement were last updated when we were still all using leaded fuel, then maybe there's a lot to be learned out of that study, and that can be applied to driveways and parking lots and other roads that aren't linear transportation. So that's really exciting. I'm going to open up the questions in just a second, so be ready to start raising your hands. I'm curious to know, and I know this wasn't on, I didn't feed this ahead of time to you. Hope I'm not springing it on you, but have you seen, so you mentioned the design example. I'll start there. Design example that DOT put on their website at the summer school. And I remember you were there too. You probably heard this. They were talking about, Laura was talking, John Coates was talking about putting more design examples up there, using that really as a resource for other designers to get ideas, maybe get their creative juices flowing based on other projects that have gone through. And I know I kind of joked about that one. I agree. Just, solving it with an exfiltration trench and going from 90 to 95 by just adding another couple hundred feet to an exfiltration trench design. Like that doesn't, get my creative juices flowing. But I'm curious to know, when you start to get some more kind of innovative project designs coming out of your consultant community or out of your office, are you thinking you'll be putting some of those forward and hopefully get those published on DEP's website? I would for sure like to see it.
I'll say, if not DEP's website, they'll be on ours.
Okay.
So, just since they're linear transportation, but always happy to share. And then, and we're actually like so that, design guideline chapter that has a lot of examples in it, we've actually shared it with DEP already for them to review and comment on. So,
Okay, good.
we're not just developing this guidance in our silo. Like we want their feedback, because again, I don't want to, this is DOT's interpretation of how it will work. And then when we get to the regulatory environment, it not work. So, getting DEP's, comments and, concerns, questions addressed, before we publish the chapter, I'm hoping that, that just streamlines our flow into a permitting. And
Yeah,
so
that's really smart.
we're
That's really
doing
smart.
that. And actually the EMCs, what triggered this thought was the aviation EMCs. So the DOT did a project with DEP, and we looked at airports and the airside pavements. And what they found was that what came off the pavement had very little nitrogen phosphorus, likely just atmospheric deposition. But as the water flowed across the green space, to get away from the secure air side, towards offsite ponds, it was a study that was done back when they were looking at how to, they were changing the security of the airports and wanted ponds out of the secure airspace. And what we found is that the stormwater actually picked up more nitrogen and phosphorus as it flowed across the green space than it was when it came off the pavement. And so that's kind of the like our basis for why we were approaching this project. And so
Wow.
those results were really great. If I could use those now, I would. I should ask DEP about that. But that's why we're going this route with the EMCs.
That's really great. Have you heard any more or talked to DEP about the cistern database of new BMP types? Are y'all getting involved in that?
So we had talked to them about it before they called it cistern, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I just kind of stressed that I am more focused on those products that can be used in a transportation environment. And there are just some products that that we don't necessarily prefer. Sure. If there's potential for roadway flooding, that's not ideal, right? Or if it's very maintenance intensive. And actually, this brings up another point. The requirements of your MS4 permit are different than the requirements for manufacturers. So I've had a lot of designers say, oh, we should use this product. The manufacturer says it only needs to be inspected once a year. And, so that's very low maintenance. Yes, that's what the manufacturer says. However, our MS4 permit says you have to inspect that quarterly. And quarterly is not annually. And so, just for designers to understand the kind of the requirements of not only the ERP program, but then also the MS4 program gets really tricky, which is also why we rolled in getting maintenance involved, because our maintenance engineers can speak to those MS4 requirements. And, that program, we obviously minimize the impact to that program as well. That is something that I would like to bring into Cistern. Is it needs to, not only do we need like the materials specs, the materials properties, and that type of review, and then what it can actually do from a nitrogen phosphorus level, but what are the maintenance requirements? How much does it cost to maintain it? What are the the special issues with the project? I was in Rhode Island last week with the AASHTO Technical Committee for Hydrology and Hydraulics. And we went on a field review and looked at some devices that were installed. So Rhode Island is under a consent decree for their MS4 program, and they're doing a lot of stuff and things for stormwater quality. And it was very interesting to see. They spent a lot of money on this project. Every sensor, like they had issues from every manufacturer for every sensor that they had installed. And then they discovered a lot of issues with the filters and the things that were required. And the maintenance was much more intensive. Like they had to have a backhoe at the job site just to go and like remove the grating. And then like the flow limitations, like they were limited to only 2.5 CFS that this device could process at a time. And just like thinking of all those things, I was like, oh my goodness, like I don't want this type of product on the roadside, because setting up MOT, just when you have large construction equipment on the side of the road, like this is way, it worked, like they had it in a park setting, so that was better, but like along a linear transportation facility, some of these devices just may not be appropriate from that kind of perspective.
I really appreciate your answer. I think that's obviously absolutely right. Your subset of technologies that are also going to be appropriate in a roadside environment are obviously going to be limited compared to the universe. But I'm also very interested and eager to kind of learn from have the industry learn from DOT, and if DOT is adopting a new type of BMP that works really well, and it's not currently in Appendix O in the applicant's handbook, and so it's not yet available universally to all the designers. But if you all submit it through Cistern and it gets approved by DEP or by the water management districts and it gets on the Cistern database, then that's a resource that the rest of the stormwater design industry in Florida can take advantage of. So I'm very happy to hear that y'all are aware of it and working with DEP on Cistern. So let's get some questions going. I was hoping to see some hands raised by now. I hope you have them ready and start hitting your hand raise buttons, and I'll call on you as I see them pop up. You don't want me to ask all of the questions.
I did see the question about when will the values be updated, and so the EMC values, there are requirements about having the number of samples that you have to have like 10 samples during a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. So the project's currently about 4 years. I mean, we may, but it just really depends on when we get the data. So sure. We're working on locations to install the monitoring equipment now, and in accordance with all of the requirements that are listed in the applicant handbook, volume 1. So, yeah. I hope sooner, but unfortunately it may take 4 years.
Well, your observation that you may be able to extract some EMC data out of the airside EMC study, like I think there's some merit to that. I would try to run that by Borja and Coates if I were you, and see if you can get some credit now.
Yep. I will.
That's smart. Carl, I saw your hand raised. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes. Hey, Jenna, thanks for sharing. Is the study you mentioned in the beginning publicly available, and which media was it?
Oh, it is publicly available. We have, I think we should have a link to it on our website. If we don't, I'll make sure it gets added. But it was actually the Silver Springs study that was done. I could probably forward. I did a presentation for Florida Stormwater Association 2 years ago that gave an update, and I can get those project numbers. Or let's see.
Jen, I don't want to take up this time while you're hunting it. If you can share the link with me, I'll make sure it gets put out.
Okay.
After the fact.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I can actually, I'll send the whole presentation to you, and then you can share that. And it's a nice update on the different projects that we were updating.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Jeff.
All right, Cole. Armando, I see you got your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jen. I have a quick question. Can you talk about the importance of following the guidelines in Appendix O versus following what we as designers would typically follow, BMP trains?
BMP trains does need to be updated. And thank you for bringing up BMP trains. We were surprised to see that it was removed from UCF's website. And so we are working on a way to host BMP trains. And so I'll stay tuned. It's since we have grandfathering, that version 4.3.5 is still of value to the department. And so we are I have a meeting next week with our IT folks to see about what I can do to host that for the engineering community. So in BMP trains, you can update there's user defined values. And so using those user defined values are is available to you to use. And I guess is there a particular BMP that's not working? Or I know that there is there's an issue with vegetative filter strips that if it's a single thing, it doesn't work. But if you put it in a train with nothing else, then it calculates. So I did request some research money to go and do some updates to BMP trains. And so I'm working with our research center to get that underway with UCF. And so that'll kind of just make things a little bit neater. But yes, right now, Appendix O may not necessarily match what's in BMP trains, and we'll have to make sure that gets updated. But the values in Appendix O are going to be what controls for your ERP permit. And that brings up another interesting thing I've seen. If you want to talk about things that don't spark innovation, I've heard, rumor mills or things like someone's like, oh, I'll just, install 3 nutrient separating baffle boxes next to each other. I was like, that's not how, because they all get certain percentage, X percentage in Appendix O, but that's really not how that would work, right? Because the moment that the trash and the large particles are, removed, then the others, the downstream, you're trying to remove dissolved things, right? Which is more trickier than just, your TSS and trash and floatables.
Right.
So, we need to think big picture and just kind of think logically through, all right, I'm the water, I'm flowing through here. What nutrients do I have left? So.
A lot of good discussion on BMP trains, and we heard from Marty Juanalista and Marco that it is down from the UCF website. He's doing a major overhaul, and he promised that it would be back up on the UCF website by the end of the year. But I'm also pleased to see it, being posted somewhere else besides either Marty Juanalista's, web page that he has for himself or UCF, which again, did take it down. But I think it can be downloaded now. Marty has his own web page. Mark Thomason knows how to get there. I'll get the link out to everybody. Your comments
so
about
Marty.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, if I can just interrupt. So Marty actually, I think he's hosting it on a separate website, not at UCF.
Yeah.
And Marty's his website has also the website that he's been hosting, it's also removed from that website.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, hopefully I didn't overpromise and will underdeliver. Mark swears there's some secret way to get it, and I saw him do it recently. So we'll post it if we can. But I'm glad to see DOT hosting it. I think that's smart as well. There's clearly a lot of need for new tools that are as flexible and work as well as we're going to have to, design to meet the new standards. We may have, this is a sneak preview, we may have Marty as a guest on one of the upcoming webinars to get an update from him on where BMP Trains is headed and kind of what the status of all that work is. And I hope we can get him. I've got a question coming in from Joe Donahue. You're next, sir. Jim Donahue, excuse me. Jim, do you still have questions?
Sorry about that. My mic was off. Hey, Jen, I had a question on the BAM materials. Do you know if FTP has thought about creating like an approved list? I know some materials like Bolden Gold, I think it's a Ferguson product. I think it uses like crumpled up tire and iron shards and different things. And just thinking about other contaminants like
PFAS and whatnot leaching into the environment. Do you know if that's been considered at all?
I think that would just be part of Cistern. I think Cistern is meant to just kind of be all of those BMPs, and engineered media would just be a BMP. But I can ask.
Please don't ever
DEP,
bring up PFAS in the context of stormwater ever again.
I completely agree. I was on an interest. So one of the perks of the job is kind of hearing from all of the states, right? And so I think Washington State was actually moving for like a wholesale ban on PFAS. And it's, you know, there was a lot of talking, and, you know, whenever we just blatantly just ban something, we always end up finding that like there was actually some good, right? And so the state of Washington wanted to ban this, and I think it was one of the Midwestern states said, like, kind of like eventually spoke up and said, well, you do know that, you know, isn't like tire rubber also a problem for fish, right? Because they were talking about fish kills and things like that. And, you know, of course, yes, you know, ground tire rubber is a problem for fish. And so they're like, well, the tire manufacturers use PFAS in tires to stop them from, you know, crumbling. And so if the state of Washington bans PFAS, then you're going to end up with those old tires. You know, it's like kind of which problem are we trying to fix? And so, yes, so I agree with you, Jeff. Like, we should never, it's very tricky, and we need like purposeful, meaningful approaches to remove things rather than like the wholesale ban. So
PFAS management is just going to be so challenging, and the least efficient way to manage it is when it's at its most kind of dispersed form, and trying to collect PFAS from stormwater is about as dispersed a way to collect it. And then, you know, so you'd be dealing with very dilute concentrations and make it very expensive to manage. I think the most efficient ways of dealing with that are going to be source removal and removing it where people are most exposed to it, like in our drinking water plants, getting rid of it in our wastewater streams. Those are where it'll be efficient. I hope the regulators never get into the thought process of looking into stormwater for PFAS and then trying to deal with it in stormwater, because it will make a rule that's already expensive really just out of sight expensive.
You know, you have to deal with it at the source. Dealing with it when it becomes runoff, I mean, it's very unfair to like the people who just own land, right? I mean, we and we do have, you know, that we do have the legislature has recognized that linear transportation systems are unique, you know, and so like we are allowed to let waters commingle with our water and go through our facilities, but we don't have to do nutrient removal for those offsite facilities, you know. That is, oh my gosh, I know normally I can quote it off the top of my head, but today I have lost the numbers. But you know, we do have that recognition from the legislature that we are unique, and so I would hope that in the future that you know, removing PFAS from an offsite source would not be a requirement.
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. Who else has questions? There's some side slope questions, but it looks like that got answered in the chat.
Yeah, I tried to go in there. So it's 1 to 6, and I think the minimum width is 10, but we tested a range of distances. I mean, you'll get removal, but there's so I think we tested 10 to 20 feet. It is part of that presentation that I'm going to send Jeff, and so you'll have a copy of that.
Thank you. There was a question from Lisa in the chat about your appetite for new BMP types that aren't in applicants' handbooks, Appendix O.
Well, just what we're looking at. So we are looking at vegetative filter strips, Lisa. There's obviously right now we're not really looking at things that aren't in Appendix O, because we're just trying to, you know, like you said, we have to, you know, we're having to react fast, right? So we're gonna use what we have right now that's available to us. And then as we kind of get in the groove of the rule and have like breathing room to see what else is out there, then we'll consider things that are not in Appendix O. But, getting something new approved is a whole nother work effort than just trying to get engineers to, stop thinking about pond sizing and thinking about nutrient removal. So we got to make those baby steps first before we can jump off of table O.
Yeah, understood, Ira. There's another question in chat that also mentioned smart ponds. The CMAQ BMP, aka Smart Pond BMP, was submitted into the cistern program here recently. So maybe that'll come out soon, and maybe there'll be something in Appendix O soon for DOT to consider.
And it is, the drainage manual currently states that our ponds cannot be controlled by mechanical means. It's been that way forever. And that's just part of our, creating a passive system, right? We are a very small but mighty DOT. I think we're the smallest like DOT in the state or in the country. Sorry. Of course, we're the smallest DOT in the state, but, we are not like a local entity that is available to like, you're in a smaller, so many square mile area. You can go and take a look at your devices, see if they're operating or not. And I have some concerns with like pre-event pond lowering, increasing a downstream tailwater. How does are you now creating an adverse condition for downstream property owners where, they would have otherwise been able to respond to a storm, but now the tailwater's higher and they can't drain. And how does that all work into our, DOT? We have, the Rule 1486 for anyone that's connecting to the department. We had, an unfortunate, instance where a developer surcharged DOT system, it caused downstream flooding and DOT was held responsible. So like if that system were to fail, DOT is responsible. And so how do we kind of, protect the department and meet our nutrient removal requirements? If I can achieve nutrient removal with a passive system, that's going to be the way that we would prefer to go. Because again, all those systems cost money and have parts and pieces and they degrade over time. And
Indeed,
it's a whole bunch more to track than just pond and mowing. I think Rhode Island said if they can just whack and mow, like if maintenance can just get away with that, then, or vac, whack and mow. That was the third one, vac. So, vacuuming out their, catch basins, mowing and weed whacking, if that can be all that they have to do, then that's their ideal maintenance, umbrella. And I think we would, want the same, something simple. Keep it simple.
I wrote that down. Vac, whack, and mow may be the title of this webinar after we're done. We'll rebrand it. So we're coming up.
That's for maintenance in Rhode Island. Sorry.
I understand. So we're coming up on 1 o'clock. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including our guest here today. Thank you again so much, Jennifer, for all of your time. We really appreciate you spending it with us today. Laura, thank you for putting the link to where these webinars, the recordings, are hosted and posted. So if you want to go watch the VAC, whack, and mow webinar after the fact, and you want to send a link to somebody, there's the link. Thanks for posting that, Laura. And thank you all for being with us today. And we hope we'll see you next month at the next Stormwater webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.